Thank you, Dr. Mabe. The next agenda item I have to update is the Southside Speedway Site update. And again, just making a connection to what you just saw before, there's many good people behind me that have probably shared many stories to you at the podium here during some of their citizens' time or via other conversations they have. So, I didn't think about it, when I went to the Veterans Museum, but again, hearing some citizens speak here, you've heard many good stories here. And again, I encourage those same people to share stories. So I have a little preface, if you will, before I introduce the consultant that we had hired to just make observations about the existing track. But again, as we've continued to hear of the possibilities of Southside Speedway to have a second life, and again, I'm glad so many people are here to be a part of this, we have tried to position the county for partners willing to invest in a racetrack. The unsolicited proposal we received a few months ago, which included a racetrack, has been brought to closure with the mutual recognition of high capital costs, amid rising financing costs and even supply chain challenges, to no longer having this proposal under consideration. Therefore, it was prudent for us to determine the existing condition and viability of the current racetrack, as we think the next logical step will be to issue a formal request for qualifications, RFQ, that will hopefully enable many potential partners to rise up, including some with racetrack proposals, hopefully, and another bid, hopefully, from the previous unsolicited proposal partners. Potential partners need to know the scope of what may be needed at the site to rehab or remediate. Therefore, a respected firm in the racing industry, Motorsports Consulting Services, was hired at a very nominal fee just to visit the track and make observations and issue a report that they did over this past week that we posted with this agenda item. Their scope was very limited to, again, just a review of the facility and make recommendations based upon observation. Martin Thake, president of MCS, is here, and if he could come to the podium as I finish up my intro comments. He's here to present his findings and answer any questions any and all of you may have. He has more than 40 years of professional motorsports experience, has performed hundreds of track inspections, designs and redesigns for championship auto racing teams, CART, International Motorsports Association, and the Sports Car Club of America. His vast experience ranges from event promoter to insurance and risk management inspector, as well as a facility and track designer. He was a member of the CART Indy Car safety team and spent 5 years as the CEO of a race car manufacturer. In order to perform the more in-depth engineering site studies that are probably warranted on the site for determining how to rehab, remediate, or to meet insurance or financing requirements, would require a far more extensive scope and a much higher cost consulting contract that may be incurred by potential partners as part of their due diligence in our RFQ process. There are no actions requested of the board tonight other than the concurrence for staff to develop this RFQ. In addition, to best position the RFQ for success, staff would like to further work with the adjoining property and willing partner, Chesterfield Auto Parts, in finding them a new location for this well-respected business. As many as know, during Southside's heyday, you had to cross the street and park on the other side, so again, having an adjoining property on the same side may again lend to a better proposal process. For those that are in the audience, we do have a public hearing tonight on the Genito Special Focus Area Plan, and this property is included within this plan area. The plan itself does not prohibit or preclude a racetrack from arising on this dirt, and any citizen who's interested in commenting about this plan is welcome to do so later tonight at the public hearing. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Thake, and again, I have some closing remarks after he's done as well.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you were told, I was retained to basically give an overview of what I saw when I got there. I've been doing this for 40 years almost. I have worked on hundreds of racetracks around the world. Joe just basically read my resume, so I'm done with that. So what I wanted to do was to just go through and show you what I saw. And let you ask any questions that you may have. So we're looking at the surface here. It's deteriorated. Unfortunately, I think it's been closed for 2 years, I believe, and so there's been no maintenance. It would be very hard to rehab that surface to make it. Again, my purview was safely use it as a track, and what was necessary to bring it up to current standards. I have to say that there's a lot of different tracks around the country that may not be up to current standards, and a lot of those are quote-unquote grandfathered by insurance companies and sanction bodies. But when you're offline for a couple of years, you basically go back to new track status. So it would have to be, upgraded. And so the surface is deteriorating. That needs to be addressed. So there's a parking paddock area, as it's called, on the inside of the oval. The barrier that surrounds that is perfectly acceptable and can be used as is. There's nothing else required there. The outside barrier, however, is steel plate, and that has not been accepted as a race barrier for many years for the obvious reasons. It breaks, and then the sharp ends stick out and can cause all kinds of damage and injury. So it doesn't absorb energy very well. And it tends to deform, as you can see on these pictures. So that again is something that would need to be replaced to make the facility usable. The debris fence, catch fence, however, whatever term you use, is not installed correctly. It's installed in a manner that would not pass an insurance company inspection in this day and age. It needs to be installed correctly, and some of the posts are leaning either in or out towards or away from the racetrack, and that leads me to believe that there's some erosion going on underground, because most of those posts are set into a concrete base. So it needs to be looked at and then redone. Billboards on the inside of the fence, so they would be the first thing you hit. Not ideal, so that they would have to come down. And billboards are supposed to be either behind the fence or above the fence. It is acceptable to hang vinyl banners on the fence, but nothing more structural than that. So this is the retention wall that is behind the debris/catch fence. And as you can see, it's starting to deteriorate in certain sections. On the I think that's the east end, where they've poured there's a permanent concrete wall around there, and it looks like it's been repaired at some point in the past 5 years or so, I'd say, just by looking at the condition of the material. That's what needs to be done around the whole place to make sure that your last line of defense, which is the fence that stops the cars getting out, you need to have that as securely mounted as possible. Again, 2 years of neglect have left pretty much every building and structure that's left on the property. They're gone. The glass is gone for most of them, which means at least 2 winters of rain and snow coming in. And I looked into a couple of them. I didn't go into all of them, but the 2 I went into, the floors were saggy and the walls were loose, and I'm pretty sure that it would cost way more to rebuild them than it would to replace them. And that pretty much goes for every structure that's on the site. Again, just more examples of business. Of structures that need to be removed. Again, the seating from the bleachers is, I think, mainly sold off before you acquired the property. But again, it needs to. All of this fence, the perimeter fence, the starter stand, the playground, the bleachers all need to be cleared out and replaced. So again, none of those are really salvageable, I don't believe. And then, so that's obviously just an aerial shot of what it was like a few years ago. I think if you have any questions, I am more than happy to go into those with you.
Thank you, Mr. Thake, and I do have some questions, and I appreciate you being here. I think your business, you're from Tucson, is that where you're
came here from Tucson, yeah.
And how many tracks have you evaluated over the course of the years, your career?
Oh, over 100.
And does that include short tracks and NASCAR sanctioned tracks?
Yep. Yeah. Yes, it does.
And in your report, I noted under the track surface section, you differentiated between the asphalt and then the subsurface.
Yes.
What is the what's the lifespan of a racetrack asphalt on a track like this?
It really varies. It depends on where you are in the country. You get freeze-thaw cycles up here. We don't get those in Arizona. So, you know, they've run snowplows around this. We don't do that in California. It's, you know, so you can get 40 years if you've got the right kind of asphalt and the right kind of aggregate and it's put down properly.
And the subsurface, does that go the same thing for the subsurface?
Yeah, I mean, if it's laid properly, you can get 40 years out of it. Usually 15 is usually when it starts to especially in parts of the country where you do get the freeze-thaw cycle. 15 years is if you do get 15 years out of a track surface, you've done well.
When you evaluate a track for safety, what are the standards, the professional standards that you evaluate it from?
Well, there are no written directives for, I mean, obvious reasons. None of the sanctioning bodies write down, this is how you do it. None of the insurance companies will write down, this is how you do it. So it's left up to people like me to establish industry guidelines that we all, you know, think is, along with the insurance companies and the sanctioning bodies, that based upon what has happened in the past, to design and then build the tracks.
When an insurance company would be called out to advise on a policy, they'd come out and presumably do an inspection on a track, and they would cite concerns at that point in time, or how would that work?
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, a reputable insurance company, a motorsports insurance company. A lot of these smaller tracks are you know, they go into companies that don't have much motorsports experience and don't send inspectors out. So, or if their inspectors do come out, they're looking at the trip and fall stuff outside of the racetrack as opposed to inside of the track. But there's a couple of large insurance companies that will always send people out to do their inspections. In fact, I trained most of their inspectors.
You said that the steel barrier on the outside
Yeah.
wall portion was not acceptable anymore. Why is that?
It's not. It doesn't hold up well. It's very high maintenance and it's sharp. You know, in the event that you get a car in the air and it lands on top of it, whatever way it lands on top of it, it's a sharp edge, and it can get damaged to the point where it's welded and welded and welded, and at some point, especially on an oval, when a car comes into contact with a wall, you want it to slide around the racetrack. To dissipate energy and just not hit anything.
And that's in keeping with another comment you made about a significant amount of lateral forces on tracks as you're moving around, right?
So yeah, I mean, that particular comment was about the surface. You know, it's a great example. I used to build for 20-something years, I built a IndyCar track on an airport in Cleveland every summer. And FAA asphalt specifications, which have to be followed at airports, are designed for wheels touching down. So that all the forces go into the ground. When you put an Indy car out there with a 300-degree Fahrenheit temperature rear tire, all the forces are going this way. So it tears up the asphalt on the runways. So that's basically what I mean.
The retention wall behind the catch fence, I mean, the pictures showed wooden sections certainly collapsing. And could you just explain why that's a problem?
Well, yeah, because when the wooden section collapses, then the fill behind it goes with it and erodes every time it rains. And then all of a sudden you've got the posts holding the fencing up and the posts holding the barrier up are loose.
I guess looking at this from a summary perspective, I noted that you had the inside barrier was okay, and is there anything beyond the inside barrier that you would recommend saving or if you think could be rehabilitated?
I don't believe so. I mean, everything there needs to be addressed, and so the outside barrier and the fence, the catch fencing system, I have no idea how deep those posts are buried, what they're buried in, what the ground is like around them, how much erosion there's been, whether there's been gophers or whatever other subterranean wildlife may be living there have caused pockets. It needs to be seriously evaluated. And
Have you been involved with the construction of new tracks?
oh yes.
And what would you guess, or would you have an idea of what a track like this would cost to rebuild from scratch?
Not knowing material or labor costs in this area.
What would it be in Tucson?
I don't build them in Tucson. I would say, based upon experience, you're looking at somewhere between, I'd say, 10 to 15 million.
Okay. That's
be my-
just the track?
No. You could get the walls, and I mean, I think you'd end up with something pretty close to what you got now for 15. But then again, if you cleared it, took it all the way down to the ground and started again, there's always something you're going to find that you don't know about. Whether it's something's leaked. I mean, racetracks are famous for underground problems that because people there's a lot of oil and fuel and other contaminants that are left on the ground or poured out of cars, all that kind of stuff. So you have to take a close look at it. But I would guess somewhere between 10 and 15 million would get you a new facility. But again, it could be more than that. I don't know the cost of doing business here.
Sure, fair enough.
And that really I wasn't asked to do that either.
Board members, Mr. Holland.
I have a question, thank you. So you would say you would have to replace almost everything, the track itself and the buildings as you saw them overall. Now, on a scale, this may be a tough question, on a scale from 0 to 10, 10 being the best, what would be the condition of utilizing the track as it is versus completely replacing it?
I don't think you can use it as it is. I wouldn't use it as it is.
You wouldn't use the track as it is, it would have to be completely replaced.
The
is what you're
surface,
saying.
the asphalt surface of the
Asphalt
racetrack.
And the buildings as well? How about the buildings?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to have spectators, then you've got to have bathrooms, you've got to have concessions, you've got to have, places for them to sit. So that's a depending upon how many people you think you're going to get, that determines how many bleachers you build, what size buildings, how many bathrooms, how many concession areas. You need ticket booths. I mean, most of those buildings that were out there, they had a purpose. They were there for specific reasons. So if you're going to operate it the same as you did before, then you're going to need basically to replace those buildings.
Replace the buildings and the track itself.
I mean, you could spend a lot of money digging into evaluating what's underneath, the post for the catch fencing or the asphalt surface. What happens when you get cracks that wide with asphalt and you drive across them really fast is that the tires are running, they get hot, they get sticky, they're supposed to. They catch the edge of that crack, start chipping away at it. Not only does the crack get bigger, it throws chunks of asphalt at the guy driving behind you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bingle.
The grass that's coming through the asphalt, is that going into the subsurface or is that just in the cracks of the asphalt?
No, I'm sure it's in the subsurface. I mean, from past experience, when I
Can I
dug up.
ask whoever's making comments in the audience to please refrain from doing so? Let's try to afford this gentleman the professionalism that the Chesterfield is capable of. Thank you.
So I think in your report you said you didn't feel like it could be milled down and a new track be laid on the subsurface because you were concerned that it would be too bumpy several years down the road.
Essentially,
But
that's correct. Yeah.
I think that's actually how that track ran for years. Is that an insurance issue or is that a preference in the person that would be putting the track together?
Well, it's going to deteriorate. It can't go anywhere but get worse. I can give you an example. So 2000, 2002, I redesigned and resurfaced a racetrack in Mexico City that they actually ran a Formula One race on last weekend. And that they have a kilometer, almost a kilometer long straightaway. and the owners is the state, and the managers decided that they didn't want to replace the racing surface that was there that hadn't been used for 20 years. They just wanted to resurface it. And that straightaway was very, very, just after all the years. And Mexico City sits on an old lake bed and is really active in the earthquake zone. So there was a lot of cracks and bumps in that surface. So they just took the top 4 inches off and put a new 4 inches of asphalt back on. And it was great for about a month. And then they didn't regrade or adjust the surface, the subsurface. So you get what we call mirroring. So whatever the condition of the subsurface is in today, and if you don't address that, it will eventually come back onto your new asphalt when you'll have to start again.
Do you think that the asphalt itself could be milled up to the subsurface and the subsurface would be able to be corrected without taking it all completely out and starting over? Or do you think you need to start grading completely from scratch?
Until you break the surface, I don't know the answer to that question. Possibly. You could, I mean, I have taken off the surface, the asphalt surface of tracks before, and used it as subsurface. Ground it up, used the grindings to be the subsurface and compacted it and get it all smooth and then put new asphalt on top of it. That's one option, most definitely. Not a paving engineer, so I don't know how doable that is without, you'd have to get some testing done, I would imagine.
So you have some concern about the subsurface, but without taking the track up, you don't know for sure what the state of the subsurface is.
That
You
is
just
correct.
believe that the asphalt itself would need to be milled down completely to the subsurface, so the subsurface could be checked and corrected or replaced. That's your
That
opinion.
would be my opinion, yeah, just based upon what I see.
And if it was in good shape, would that make a significant difference in the cost of rehabbing the track?
I really don't know the answer to that question.
Board members, any other board members have any questions for Mr. Thake? Dr. Casey?
Just in some closing comments for me, and if it triggers more questions for Mr. Thake, then that's fine. But again, as we noted previously, we're going to do our best, with your concurrence, to draft a request for qualifications. The request, is going to be clear, that if someone has a racetrack concept idea, some of the potential bidders of it want to come out to the track and do some testing, engineering testing, looking at the subsurface. We will avail, people to do that. We just try to hire somebody to make observational points to bring us to this point for tonight. I know that the people who did the unsolicited proposal, they probably did not do some of the subsurface testing either. So again, that they themselves may also want to venture into that. So there is, again, no actions for you tonight. And it's just to make it clear, whatever process we go through, if there is a rising potential partner that arises, that starts and ends with you as far as the next steps in further working with them. All we'd want to try and do is position this process to get as many good, valid proposals. I would imagine, good partners would try and determine what their own insurance companies or financing institutions would want out of this site, and they themselves may be visiting as part of this process, and we would avail them as well.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Carroll?
And I understand your expertise, and I appreciate you coming out here and doing the report. How much do you know, outside of what you looked at, how much do you know about the history of Southside Speedway, the track itself?
Very little.
Very little.
Yeah.
My point goes along with what Mr. Engel said, and it's not lost on me that the track is in poor condition right now. But one of the things that we've heard from many of the people in the community, and certainly from people who used to race there, is that it's the toughest short track in NASCAR. And the reason it was tough is because of the type of surface that it was. Mm-hmm. That it was not a beautiful, smooth surface like Daytona once they redid it, or Talladega, or some of those other tracks. That the actual surface of the track itself is actually what made it difficult to race in the first place, which means you had to be more skilled to be able to be successful on that track. And so, I mean, and along with what Mr. Engel said, I think without actually doing the testing or without going down to see what the surface is underneath, it's hard to say that it couldn't be back restored with a new surface to what it actually was before, which was the toughest little short track in NASCAR. And so I appreciate the work that you did, and yeah, the pictures are very telling when you look at the conditions of the building and everything else. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to even make it to be an acceptable venue for someone to race on. But hopefully, we'll have some people from the community that'll come forward with a proposal that'll work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thake.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.